For centuries, the Book of Job has been seen as maybe the definitive story of human suffering and faith. It's just this incredibly profound, powerful work. But what if its origins are way more complex and honestly, way more ancient than we've ever really thought? What if this masterpiece is actually just one voice in a much, much older conversation about why bad things happen to good people? Today, we're going to do a little literary investigation to see if we can uncover the ancient blueprint that might have shaped one of the most enduring stories ever told. The first clues that something is a little different about Job, they come from the text itself. Even when you read it alongside other books in the Bible, the story just has this distinctly foreign feel to it. It doesn't quite fit the usual mold. Okay, let's just start with the man himself. Job isn't an Israelite hero. He's presented as a Gentile, maybe an Edomite from this far-off land of Uz. Now, that might seem like a small detail, but it's actually a huge signal. It immediately places him in this broader, international context and connects his story to wisdom traditions far beyond Israel's borders. It's our first major hint that to really get Job, we've got to look outward. And when we do look outward, specifically to ancient Mesopotamia, we find something truly astonishing. We find these powerful literary works that are tackling the exact same themes as Job. But get this, they were written thousands of years earlier. This is where the story of Job really transforms from a singular masterpiece into a dialogue with deep human history. First up, there's a poem called Ludlul Bel Nemeki. It means, I will praise the Lord of Wisdom. But today, scholars have given it an incredible nickname, the Babylonian Job. And as you're about to see, that name is incredibly fitting. Then you've got the Babylonian Theodicy. Now, this is another Mesopotamian poem, but its real genius is in its structure. It's this raw, back-and-forth dialogue between a man in agony and his friend, and they're arguing over the very meaning of divine justice. Sound familiar? So we have these two ancient texts, separated from Job by centuries. But how closely do they really line up? Let's put them side by side. This is where the outline of this ancient blueprint for suffering really starts to come into focus. Just look at the narrative arc. In Ludlu Bel Nemeki, a righteous, high-ranking guy suddenly suffers this devastating reversal of fortune. He questions the gods, he endures his ordeal, and eventually he's restored. And in the book of Job, a righteous man, the greatest in the East, suffers a devastating reversal of fortune, questions God, and is eventually restored. The narrative skeleton is almost identical. It's uncanny. Now let's look at the literary structure. The Babylonian Theodicy uses a dialogue, right? A debate between a sufferer and a friend to explore why bad things happen. The Book of Job takes that very same framework and just expands on it, pitting Job against three friends in these incredible poetic speeches. But the fundamental technique, using a debate to wrestle with suffering, it's clearly shared. And these aren't just superficial coincidences. All of these texts, across different cultures and centuries, are wrestling with the same profound, universal human questions. Why do good people suffer? Can our limited wisdom ever truly grasp the divine? And what does divine justice actually look like? So, this leads us to the critical question. How did these ancient Mesopotamian ideas find their way into a foundational Hebrew text? Well, the answer seems to lie in a period of immense national trauma, a moment of cultural collision and creativity. This timeline really lays it all out. The Mesopotamian texts were written around 1700 BCE, that's more than 1,000 years before Job. Then, from 598 to 538 BCE, this defining event happens, the Babylonian exile. For decades, Israelite scholars and thinkers are living in Mesopotamia, surrounded by these very literary traditions. And it's only after this period that the Book of Job as we know it is written. The exile, it's the bridge between these two worlds. I mean, just imagine the trauma of that exile. Losing your homeland, your temple, your sense of divine protection. It would force you to ask the deepest possible questions about God and justice. It makes perfect sense that Israelite thinkers, now immersed in Babylonian culture, would see these powerful existing literary models as the ideal tools to process their own national suffering. And what's really amazing is that we have linguistic clues baked right into the text itself. The Hebrew in the Book of Job is unique. It's peppered with influences from Aramaic and even Persian, languages that became dominant during and after the exile. These are like literary fingerprints, pointing directly to that specific moment in history. So does this mean Job is just a copy? Absolutely not. understanding its roots doesn't diminish its power one bit. In fact, it actually helps us appreciate its true and singular genius. Look, this isn't plagiarism, it's a brilliant act of cultural dialogue and masterful reinterpretation. The author took an existing literary form, an international genre for discussing suffering, and used it to explore that timeless problem from a radically new, uniquely Israelite perspective, one centered on this covenant relationship with a single God.
So really, the crucial point is that Job's brilliance isn't just in the story it tells, but in how it joins the conversation. It's a powerful and sophisticated response, a new chapter in a dialogue that humanity had been having for over 1,000 years. It took an ancient blueprint and built something theologically revolutionary.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Does knowing that Job is part of a long, ancient tradition of questioning God make it less special? Or does it make its cry even more profound, connecting one man's anguish to a chorus of human voices stretching all the way back to the dawn of civilization?